Good day, fellow champions of inclusion. I'm Aaron, and this is the Inclusive Dad podcast, where we explore inclusion and make it practical. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me in exploring ways we can create a more inclusive world together. You are important, you matter, and you can make a difference. Today, my guest is Hugh Flynn. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Why don't you just start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Who is Hugh Flynn?
Yeah.
Well, I'm here today primarily as the author of a new memoir called Something Special Be, which is currently available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback versions. I've spent most of my life as a communications professional. I've worked for a number of Fortune 500 corporations as a communications manager and director. I've been an editor-in-chief of a California, or actually Western United States trade publication. I'm also a award-winning playwright. My plays have been produced throughout the United States, in Canada, and also in Europe. I have been a lifelong advocate for people of underserved populations, particularly people with special needs or people who are disabled, or whichever way they like to describe them, their issues. And I continue to be. And Something Special Be is a memoir that I wrote about the year, well, it really was 2 years, but the year that I attempted to become the conservator of the person and estate for my magnificent, wonderful, and beloved brother, Aaron. And so I'm happy to sit here today and talk to you about that and anything else we can chat about in the time allotted.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all that. Let's start off as what is your definition of inclusion?
Well, this is the way excuse me. It's still morning here.
That's all good.
And we're having these 30-degree changes in weather from day to day, and I have a reactive airway. So today it is 67 outside. Yesterday it was 99. So,
Wow.
Yikes.
Yep.
Anyway, so that's become somewhat of a hot topic, I would say, in terms of how people talk about it. It's certainly getting a lot more headlines and coverage, and a lot of it is fairly negative. And so I would simply answer that question this way. I think inclusion means play nice. That's what it means. And I say that because that is how I was raised. So when you are in an environment, and when you are young, and young people are adaptable, although they seem to be increasingly less so for some reason, but that's because of a number of other issues, which we can get to if you'd like. But you make sort of an expansion of your perception and your worldview about things. And mother, given that I had Aaron, who was a couple of years, about 3 years older than me, actually. And then my oldest brother was also had disability. So we had by nature, we had a very inclusive family, and we had a very diverse family, and we didn't even know it. And we never told anybody that, it's just that here we are. And that's what I mean. So what happens, I think, more often than not with various efforts, initiatives to try to get people to become inclusive, sensitive, or what we now call DEI programs, it becomes sort of a car wash sort of approach to things. And they don't work a lot of the time. I've been through them myself many times. And they're either car wash approach is maybe one way to say, or whether it's a Band-Aid or sort of a thing. And I think as much as not, it just creates a lot of resentment. There's already some confusion. And then what we don't want, or what I don't think we want, is a lot of resentment. There are enough challenges, enough hills to climb without sort of creating new ones. If you play nice when you're young and you learn, and you have parents that say that, that's not hard to do. You are comfortable. You are comfortable without thinking about it, that you're okay in environments where there are people that don't look like you. They might not talk like you. They may not move like you, and they may not think like you. Otherwise, I fear we get into sort of artificial constructs about how people should think and how people behave. And I got to tell you, that just ain't going to work. I think our current political climate is perfect evidence to anyone that would like to dispute that with me. Look at where we've gone. I mean, that's why we've gone there in large degree. So play nice. So that means parents must act like parents and not friends and allies and whatever they want to think of themselves as these days. And you set the tone. You set the tone. And your children, or bar, if you will. I've done a lot of coaching, a lot of recreational therapeutic program coaching, directing, and you have to set a bar for kids. And if you do that, and in my experience, they typically come up to the bar. They want to be part of the bar. So if you set that early in life, I think a lot of this downstream stuff that we sort of have now is a lot easier to negotiate. A lot easier.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. What was it like growing up with a disabled, I guess, two disabled siblings? Siblings with disabilities.
So one with a cognitive disability, that's Aaron, and one with a physical disability, that was George. They're both in the book. They had to be in the book. Extraordinary people. So there's really two answers to that. One is didn't think too much about it because of what I just said. And two, I was typically in some sort of a position of trying to figure out why other people weren't there with, why it was so difficult for so many people. I mean, I got in a shitload of fights. I mean, as growing up, I mean, I would have done that regardless of what, if someone was going after, my brother, I would have beat their ass regardless. But typically, obviously, the invite was because he was deemed an easy target, and of course he was. But I got to say, I am who I am today in large degree because I had the experience of these two remarkable men in my life. And I don't use that term like they are totally, totally remarkable people.
Right.
Listeners outside of sort of the scope of experience that I'm describing might find that, oh, well, I've heard that before from other people. And okay, maybe you have. And I would be very comfortable saying, I would invite you in, just to one day, inside the circle, and then have you come out of that circle and tell me if you still feel the way you did before I invited you in. Because I'm telling you, there's richness in my there's a without tooting my own horn, but I will say these are all gifts. The ability for me to look and analyze and see and understand people and be in the world the way that I am, and a human self, because Aaron was nothing if he wasn't the most authentic person I have ever known.
Right.
It was just a daily lesson for me. It was like, well, now, wait a minute now. Life is hard, which is also something people seem to forget now, because every life. And so if I'm offended, so it's an international incident. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Life is basically a one long offense. People say, what's adversity? That's it. You're born, it's adversity, and then you die. In between, it's simply how you manage it. It's how you manage it. And then Aaron, the adversity, this guy, George too, the adversity this guy dealt with, handled it so much better than I did. I mean, really. And just probably the greatest teacher I think I ever had in terms of trying to just figure out who I am and where I am in the world and what I want to do and the way I want to see things, and my ability to kind of reach over to other people who don't see the things that I see and be able to kind of sit down and talk to them about it. Those are great gifts. And some of that stuff is just, you can't teach that stuff, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with disability is I didn't really, growing up, don't remember hearing the word, disability, disabled, knowing anybody. So when my daughter, when my daughter was born, kind of everything was brand new, and it's like you're talking like for me it was. I mean, it changed a lot of things. Like what I thought was important all of a sudden wasn't, and it's hard to describe all of it, but I understand what you're saying
But
for sure.
so so that this is what I say a lot of times about a lot of things. Life happens sometimes in a big way. You know,
Right.
it's a woo, you get a cancer diagnosis. Well, that's not the end. That's life happening in a big way. You have something like, well, first give birth to you add a child to your family union.
Yep.
Wow. I mean,
Right.
boing, 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 all the lights are going off, right?
Yep.
And that's what that's when we as human beings sort of step up or we don't,
Yep.
So yeah, I'd love if you could just sidebar a little bit and tell me a little bit about your daughter, because I know you have a daughter, but I don't know much more than that, other than I believe she has epilepsy, or she did.
Yep. So yeah, my daughter Cecilia, she's 22. Has
She's
had seizures
22.
since she was 2 or 3 months old.
Okay.
And then she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, so she uses a power wheelchair to get around.
Okay.
So needs help with a lot of daily living tasks. So there's a lot of, daily things we need to help her out with. But like you're saying, I mean, you know how she's feeling. She's authentic. Like she loves to sing and go to concerts. I mean, when we went to church when she was little, she would just be there, belting out the songs as loud as she could and like not caring. And I'm sitting there like, I can't do that. I would care
Yeah.
about what people are thinking. So
What they
yeah, it's
think.
just
Yeah.
kind of jealous of that part of it and stuff. So yeah, loves music, still loves music and singing, going to concerts. So we
So it
try to
sounds
go
like,
just if we can.
not to interrupt you, but it sounds like she loves life.
Yep,
Like
for sure.
how many people don't anymore?
Right.
I mean, what the
Yeah.
hell's happening?
Right.
Yeah,
For sure.
right. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, really? Sit
Yeah.
down, take a pill. You know, um, that's beautiful. Now, does is Cecilia living independently, semi-independently? What's her circum? You mind me asking?
It's
I
okay.
this
Yeah,
is my thing. I always ask people.
she currently lives at home with her mom and then comes over to my place
Okay,
a couple nights a week. So that's where she's
well, that's
living
cool.
currently.
And she's
Yeah.
22, so she's still really super young. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all good. Why did you write the book?
Well, I kind of had to. Um, but as a writer, I was sort of, well, during the process, I was, because it ended up becoming this massive um, legal confrontation. And anyone that's ever had that experience, or as I should say, has the misfortune of having that experience,
Hmm.
I mean, you have more paperwork. You've slaughtered more forests, to get the paperwork. So I have this reams. I had this, I'm making light of it, but I had just a massive archive,
Sure.
and also while we were going through the process, I was doing some journaling, um, not with any objectives for any sort of a product, but just to sort of keep track of my own thoughts and where we were going and what was happening, because I had never done that before, and I knew some people who had, so it was a terrific learning
Hmm.
curve for me. And of course, that was just really the sort of the superficial aspect of the learning curve. The learning curve really was, I had to sort of develop a revised sense for a lot of things that I didn't think I ever would have to revise, in terms of what I thought was true in the world, what was truth and what wasn't truth.
Hmm.
So I wrote the book because it was sitting there, so I was able to take a lot of that information that was timely and written while the process was going on. But afterward, um, I started putting it together, and I thought, this has absolutely all the elements of a tremendous story. Um, and talking to a few people who work with special needs and people with disabilities in a professional sense, um, I was hearing, we don't know of any stories like this. We don't know of any at all. So I thought maybe it's time to put something down. Um, and so that sounds easy, but I really worked on the book for about 10 years, um, uh, for a number of reasons. So, and the second part of the answer is, I wanted as many people as possible to be able to shake Aaron's hand, even metaphorically. And that is what I sort of kept in front of me as kind of a guiding post as I wrote the story. Because I got to say, the guy brings and brought so much into the world. I thought I got to spread this out. I don't have anything else. I don't have anything better to offer. So that was a big thing. Yeah.
Do you want to talk maybe about a little bit about what is conservatorship and why did you petition to become Aaron's conservator?
Yeah, I didn't know, really much. So when I started out, I started calling people and I said, well, can I be a guardian? And first thing, people kind of slapped me down and said, you know what you're talking about? We don't do that. He's an adult. No, you got to do a conservatorship. So I didn't know what the term was.
Yeah.
That's kind of my starting point, which I thought, looking back, kind of rewind. Well, that's good. Let me put that in the book, So there's his story, and then there's my story, and then they kind of merge, and then they kind of go forward together. But a conservatorship is I think a very misunderstood term. A lot of people don't quite get it. It gets a lot of bad press, in some cases earned. There's obviously a lot of very notable people who have conservatorships in their life. Of course, one of the more famous one is the Britney Spears conservatorship, which just, everybody was out of their mind over that. I'm not entirely sure. I certainly don't understand all the facts of it, but I will say there were some things about that were a little concerning to me, at least. But basically, essentially, it's sort of like I guess an easy way to describe it is it's a more legal, formalized process of allowing another individual to have some of the authority and power that you have in your life. You share that with them. You give that to them. So an example would be, you can do that in a less formal sense just by a power of attorney document, for example. I think a lot of people are familiar with that, where you say, if something happens to me, I want this person to be able to make medical decisions for me. That's advanced directive, for example. And the conservatorship is really, it's sort of an expanded application of that. In California anyway, which is where I live, there's a limited or a general conservatorship. A limited conservatorship can be tiny. It can be simply, I'm going to be able to help you with your medical decisions. That could be the complete four corners of that conservatorship. Or it could be a general. A general conservatorship would be somebody who has been deemed 100% totally disabled. And so another individual has to make decisions about all of the aspects of that person's life. So in the case of Aaron, I, of course, had to consult attorneys, which is, ay, Gewalt. I mean, that's just like, that's another part of the story. That's a big part of the story. It's like, wow, we ended up going down the limited conservatorship, realm. And just for the edification of your audience, Aaron had lived with me for about just over a year at that point. And we'd come up to a medical emergency, which nobody anticipated. And here I was in this position which required some surgery. And I had to make all these decisions. I had no authority to do so. And I was working with some of our siblings. They were scattered hither and yon all over the country. That's another part of the story. It gets more interesting, more complex, more detailed. And that's kind of how we ended up going down the road. And so that's maybe a little long-winded explanation for conservatorship, but I got to tell you, once you get involved with one, you're going to be you're going to be transfixed with the amount of wind that's in the conservatorship process. Right. Now, they can be extremely useful and in this case, absolutely necessary, and or they can be, a problem. And I've read as many stories as I'm sure anyone has, that there's lots of grift in some systems in some states, and states are different. How they manage their conservatorships are very different. And there's loopholes, and there's problems, and there's abuse, and there's all of that. And that is true. That's also true in just about everything else in life. So there's certainly a move. I think I don't know if I'd call it a national move to try to get some of this a little more standardized from state to state, so that there isn't quite so much leakage in the system. Because it's a tool. It's a tool to help. That's what it's for, is to help someone. If you don't want to help someone, then don't do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between a guardianship and a conservatorship?
Yeah, it's just a guardianship is a pediatric designation, and a
Oh,
conservatorship is for an adult. And because Aaron was almost 50 at the time,
okay.
And I had never ever thought that was going to happen. I never thought in my life that happened. I always thought in my life, I think we're going to end up together someday. I had always thought that somehow. And so, that was, well, when that happens, great, and that part had happened. And then afterward, it was like, well, we're just as happy as, two peas in a pod. We couldn't be happier. And I live in Los Angeles. He just loved it. I mean, so, his life at, like, when lots of people's lives are shrinking, his life was just exponentially opening up and growing, and the experiences and the range of opportunities were just staggering to him. They were to me for a while. I had to play catch up a lot. So that's a simple difference. Difference.
So what obstacles did you face in trying to become Aaron's conservative?
Yeah, and that's the story. That's the book.
Okay.
Of course, some of them I've already alluded to, which was dealing with the legal system, which, to use, acceptable dinner time terms, is, opaque sometimes. And I was astonished with how tone deaf some of these professionals were, who were in this line of law. And this is their bread and butter. This is what they do, and I mean, so you have a daughter who is different, and we're all different, but she has differences where she, so you can understand the experience where you go out into any sort of environment, or even in your own life, in your own environment, and suddenly she's being treated like a circus sideshow. I mean, people stare and they gawk and they ask stupid questions. I'm not talking about 5-year-olds, and things like that. And this was happening in the legal system. This was happening to these professionals. I was astonished and appalled at certain times. So that was the first thing. So trying to remain, professional and courteous with some of these people. Believe me, was it was a workout, a heavy duty workout, as I said, we had the medical issue, and then so I said, well, we're going to do this, so let's do this, and okay. And then what happened was my family blew up. Our family just blew up, and which was probably, doesn't matter if it was or wasn't, but I would just say, for conversation, probably the biggest shock of my life. I could not believe it. I mean, I couldn't believe that I was being opposed, which is the term, and that there was a legal opposition which was being filed by multiple attorneys, and this, what we thought was just this formality, turned into this, Lord of the Rings epic. I mean, with unbelievable amounts of conflict, which is the name of the game. So, and that's another reason to write the book. If you got conflict like that, boy, it makes a story just. This is a long book. I'll tell your audience that. People, I mean, it's 500. It's a little over 500 pages. And I have had readers that I know and readers I don't know say, I read that book in 2 days. I read that book in a week, because it is. It's just, you just flipping those pages. You're like, what is going on here? Yeah. So I'm sure I've got off topic. So it's your job to keep me on topic.
Yeah. So I kind of alluded to, but why did the family oppose your petition for conservatorship?
That's, go into a lot in the book. I mean, because so part of the job of the author is to try to be able to rewind and unfold the story so that,
Sure.
that the reader can discover it as the narrator is discovering it. And so there was certainly one sibling who just hated me for largely the fact that I'm a gay man, and not exclusively, but that was certainly part of it. And then this is revealed a little bit later in the process. It certainly was to me. There was some financial chicanery going on with Aaron's public benefits, which I wasn't aware of, and I simply had to learn that in the course of this process, because if you do a conservatorship, then eventually you're going to have to get into certain things like, what is the financial profile, what's the assets of the proposed conservatee, and those sorts of things. And then my astonishment went to disgust. I mean, I was so really blown apart by the discoveries I was making. And so that's how I've laid this book out, sort of one chapter after the next. And then suddenly we were in a legal process that went on for over a year. Yeah. Which really means the lawyers win.
Yes.
So my position was, and Shakespeare was absolutely right. So so my position was early in the book, then we can move on next question. But I said, okay, so you're either on Team Aaron or you're not. And I needed that to be able to keep myself from losing my own mind, because one of the collateral expenses, beneath the line expenses of the process, which I hadn't expected, was I could lose my whole family over this. Is this going to happen to us? Is this going to happen to me? So no, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, you're just trying to do what you thought was the best for your brother, and then all of a sudden this huge thing blows up.
I was doing what I thought was best for him, but I also was doing, let me be clear, I was doing what he wanted. So Aaron, predated his move from the East Coast to my home in Los Angeles was our mother, who was still his primary caregiver, had become ill, and our father had recently died, and she was no longer in a position to be able to provide any caregiving. So, I said, well, this would be the time, let's do this, because I think I mentioned before, I always thought he'd, and I had a room, I had a guest room. I said, well, we'll just keep, and he'd already been here, 3 times for extended vacations. He would stay 2 or 3 months at a time.
Okay.
And we go and do all, the stuff you do when you come to California. You go to Disneyland, you go to the beach, you go to San Diego Zoo, you go to Knott's Berry Farm, you do all those wonderful things, that kind of stuff. We loved all that stuff, and that's great. That's fun to go to those things. But then there's living here, which is a different thing. So that predated that, and the position was, there was another brother who had power of attorney for our mother. And so his financial accounts were linked to hers. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on that, but there was that financial piece. And, I didn't make anything of that. And I said, well, listen, I'll bring him back the second he wants to come back. And then in the course of 3, 4, 5, 6 months, 7 months, Aaron, you want to go back? Should we go back? Mother is still there. No, I don't want to go back. I want to stay here. Okay, so then we're coming up on a year, and then we had the medical issue. And I said, listen, should we go back? We can go back. No, I don't want to go back. So really, I was doing what I thought was right, but more importantly, I was defending his choice, his right to self-determination, which is sort of not really what you do when you set up a conservatorship, because you're really taking authority away from someone. Right. You're taking that away from them. But in this case, it was the only tool that I had to make sure I could enforce his choices.
Right.
Yeah. And it was I'm sure it wasn't your typical conservatorship, which is another reason to put it into a book.
Yeah.
So that's all kind of the landscape of
Yeah,
that. Many moving pieces.
for
Good
sure.
grief. Yeah.
What can other people, or what is something that you hope other people learn from your experience?
Well, first of all, I hope they get a chance to read it, and because the experience is, I think, instructional from the point of the narrator, which would be me. But I think more
Hmm.
importantly, it's also look at this man here, because he's really the primary character of the story, and even he's not the narrator, but he's the entire world goes around that one character. All the conflict circulates around this character. Um, and I think what I hope people would be able to maybe be able to learn, or would enjoy learning, is your expectations about someone sometimes aren't quite as accurate as you might have thought they were, you know,
Hmm.
and that was first and foremost in my structural approach to the story, because I learned a tremendous amount about him, and I thought I knew absolutely everything about him
Hmm.
in this process. And some of that was also driven by the fact of what I think I did too, was how he was changing, how he changed in this process, and how I hate to say it, but I will say it because it's true. It's in the book. It's in black and white. How I underestimated him, me, his champion. I mean, I was guilty of doing that. And then once again, I was instructed by my great teacher, wait a minute, this is what I want. This is what I need to have happen. No one in the rest of my family, I think this is true. Even for the siblings who supported me, there were two, and they were very important. In a conservatorship, you need some familial support. You're going to have a hard road to hoe if you don't have that.
Sure.
But I had two. We're a big family, so I had two siblings, including my brother George, who was CP. George was the most irascible person who ever lived. I mean, a raconteur with the very best in the world, and he was always like a honing point for me when I was losing my mind, and I was
Yeah,
periodically losing my mind.
sure.
It was called George, and George with his expletive laden rants, was just listen. Also the oldest, so he has that.
Hmm.
He's got that energy. Listen, and I would, and um, we we all sort of moved through this process, I think, in ways that we really didn't think we did, and I think all of us realized that, you know, as much as as I thought, and this is a big learning part, as much as we thought we all knew Aaron, we really learned to get to know him in a different way, partly because he was simply in a process and environment he'd never been in before. So we were putting him in a place to say, hey, how are you going to handle this? And he was like, God damn it, I'm going to handle this. And I mean, I always deferred, this is what he wants and this is what we're doing. So we all kind of moved, and some of us kicking and screaming, particularly people that opposed us,
Yeah.
and they had way more money than I did and all that sort of thing. But it was an incredible situation. And so a lot of people are going to find themselves in situations like that. I'm sure you have at times, whether it's a conservatorship or not. And I felt at many times that I couldn't do it. I couldn't go on. Let's negotiate. Let's get them off of. Let's stop this. Especially when the bills started coming in. Good God, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and then I looked at Aaron and I said, we can't. We're not doing that.
For sure.
This is there are very few times, and I'll speak for myself, in life where you have such absolute clarity about everything. And this is one of those processes. I hope that comes across in the story.
Yeah. What is one tip you can share today to help the listeners be more inclusive? So just something everybody can start doing to be more inclusive.
Read.
Mm.
We live in an increasingly illiterate society.
Mhm.
And read something. Read something. I know social media is so toxic. I mean, it is so negative. It is so nasty. It is so ugly, and yet it has captured the attention of the world, if you will, certainly the United States. And I would say, turn that shit off and read. How's that?
That's a good one. That's a
Start
good
with the
one.
book.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. Where's the best place for everybody to connect with you?
I don't do social media tremendously, but they
Okay.
can reach me on my email. And I do have an Instagram site that I set up specifically with the launch of the book,
Okay.
which
Sure.
is just Hugh Flynn 24. And there's zillions of fabulous images of Aaron there, which people can enjoy. I mean, poof, I mean, it should have been a movie star. I mean, that was his nickname, movie star. I mean,
Mhm.
just the perfect subject for any photographer. He would do anything you wanted. I mean, he was like Lucille Ball in that way. I mean, it was like, do anything, do this, Lucy. All the people that worked with her said she would do anything, and it was, he would do
Sure.
that. I don't mean in an exploitive way, but
Yeah.
that's what a person who's control of the lens. They want their subject to relax, be themselves, and that was like boom. I think you alluded to it earlier. It's like, boy, I'm still trying to learn how to do that. I mean, when I walk out the goddamn door, I was like, oh my God, how's my hair? And Aaron's like, boom, let's go. And in fact, there's several stories in the book. Of course, we lived here, and we went to Beverly Hills often, and we went where the world goes.
Mhm.
And I had stopped telling him how to dress,
Sure.
because this mother was mother, and she told all of us how to dress, and so and that was huge. I mean, Aaron, I mean, you just don't unless you live that experience, you don't know what it's like until you've never had it, and then someone just says, wear whatever you want, and we would go and, sometimes he would come up with some pretty interesting outfits, and people would just, I mean, the hostile sort of reception was always interesting to me, because we live in Los Angeles, where people regularly don refuse as style. I mean, I thought, really, you're judging him because your trash has a label on it? Let that man walk down because that's the other thing about him. If you can rock it, then rock it, and the man can rock anything.
That's great.
So yeah, I know I'm getting off point, but yeah, I think there we are. Did I get off point again?
No, it's all good.
Forgive me, audience.
You're awesome. Are you ready for the last question?
Oh no, we've come to the last question. We'll have to make up
Ready?
some more. Okay, I'm ready. Shoot.
You like Spam lunch meat? Yes or no?
I like the low-fat version. Have you tried that?
Version? I actually didn't know there's a low-fat version.
Maybe they don't carry that in Minnesota. No, there's the 33% less fat.
I gotcha.
So it's not like totally fake. I mean, it's not totally fake. It's just a little less. So,
Gotcha.
and I'll tell you, I mean, you know what I use it for? When
What?
I make fried rice. It's fabulous. Instead of buying like Chinese sausage or something like that,
Sure.
which is just also Spam makes the best fried. If you want a little meat in your fried rice,
Sure.
brilliant.
There you go.
So, and it lasts for what's the shelf life on that? 62 years, something like that.
It's a lot. Let me see what this one is. This goes till April 20. This goes till April of 27, and I've had it for a while. So yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. Back during COVID, those were things that we stocked up on for sure. Yeah. We're getting the Spam in the house. So
yeah, I asked that question since I live near Austin, Minnesota, where they make Spam and where the Spam Museum is located. So I've been asking all my guests just as a fun question. So
well, one of the things I loved as a kid growing up was Scrapple. You ever have that? If you think Spam is bad, you don't even, or not bad, not the word. If you think Spam is questionable, Scrapple is, woo, that's a whole other arena there.
What is that? Never heard of
That
it.
question has never been answered by any human being.
Oh,
It poses
oh my.
it poses a sausage, but as soon as
Oh,
you put it in your mouth, you're like, this is not sausage.
yeah. That's crazy.
No, yeah, we had that quite a bit growing up. Mother was always looking for the bargains, you know.
There you go. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it.
We're done? Okay. It was my pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
I think you
For
should
those
have your
listening,
daughter on sometime.
yeah, I should. That would be fun. For
Yeah.
sure. To those listening, thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey. It is truly an honor. Please join the podcast newsletter by clicking on the link in the episode description to keep up with the latest episodes. Together, we can make the world more inclusive. Until next time, stay empowered and be a champion for inclusion.